Welcome to the Knowledgebase Ninjas Podcast, where 𝐊𝐞𝐲 𝐓𝐚𝐤𝐤 of Document 360 finds the best SaaS self-service knowledge bases in the world and then interviews their creators. Let's get started with today's episode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Our guest today is Rahel Bailie, Senior Consultant and Founder at Content Seriously Consulting. Welcome, Rahel, to the Knowledgebase Ninjas Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you. And thank you for having me on the show.
Fantastic. So let's kick off this podcast by another quick introduction about yourself. Please feel free to add more to what you're doing currently and how did it all start?
Okay. Well, I started off in technical communication back in the 1990s, and then at some point went into educational material and came back to kind of high tech. And then in 2001, I moved into content strategy, and I've been there ever since. I called myself content strategist before the term was even known, and that was a little bit of a bumpy ride. But once content strategy started to be on the map, then it was more clear sailing from there. And in 2012, I started getting inquiries about working in the UK, and I kept getting gigs in the UK. So now I've settled here, and I just became a citizen, actually.
Many congratulations on the citizenship part, Rahel. So it's very interesting to know how you have transformed into various roles. So please share your journey into opening your own consultancy.
So when I was a technical communicator during the first .com crash in around 1999, 2000, there was this downturn in the market, and Canada, especially Vancouver, it was Silicon Valley North. So a lot of American companies would come and open a branch office in Vancouver. And when they needed to cut their budget, they just cut the Vancouver office. So I found myself out of a job and looking for something to do. And I went to a career consultant who said, basically, you are working way below your level. You should either be a director of content, of technical communication, or you should open your own consultancy. And because all these offices were closing down, it seemed that the best thing to do would be to open my own consultancy. And it was probably the best decision I ever made, because I was more in control of my career, and I could do the kind of strategic gigs that I wanted to do. I would get the strategic content contracts, and it suited me better. So in my other job that I left just before then, I remember working with the director of client services to automate a lot of things. And the boss that I had at the time, the director, who was operating way above her level, she was basically saying, "This is terrible. You're going to turn us into proofreaders." And I thought, you really don't get it, do you? And so, now when I'm going as a consultant, instead of being ignored and so on, I was working with people who really got the value proposition of why you would want to automate all the rote tasks and then be able to spend your time doing more strategic things. And it just suited me. So I've been doing that more or less ever since.
Great. So you feel more rewarding, correct, when you have your own business and own consultancy?
Yes.
Super. So what led you to change from being a technical communicator to a content strategist then?
Well, I think it's not mutually exclusive. Like, I think you can have content strategists who are strategists for technical communication. But in my case, I was getting contracts. Some of them had to do with technical communication, and some had to do with kind of pure play web marketing or journalism sites. So I kind of branched out. So I wouldn't say I left technical communication, but I went up a level in terms of I didn't actually deliver content deliverables anymore. What I delivered was the strategies that would help people deliver their deliverables better, if that makes any sense.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
That's the way my brain works. I was always about efficiency and systems, and now they have something called systems thinking. I was always a systems thinker without knowing it, and I was always a consultant without knowing it. In terms of being the person who is always looking at workflows and thinking there must be a better way. There must be a better way. So I think that's what led me to do that, because I was tired of doing things in kind of old, clunky, manual ways. I wanted to think bigger and think more efficiently, and being a content strategist allowed me to do that.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So, as important factors when creating your content, what would you consider?
So this is another one of, it depends. So it depends on the type of content. It depends on what you're going to do with the content. So if I were to think of some universal truths, I guess, it would be make sure that your content is semantically marked up, and make sure that it's categorized well, so that you can automate whatever you need to automate down the line. So the big push now is to be able to scale. The companies are growing and they want to be able to scale content production, and they want to be able to personalize. And the only way you can do this with any efficiency is to really mark up your content. And, so you kind of chunk it up, mark it up, all of those intelligent content principles that Anne Rockley talks about. So these are the factors that I would say are universal. Now, technical communicators are way ahead of the marketers on this, because we've had to do more with less for decades. So, working in FrameMaker, working in online help, and being able to do multi-channel publishing, that's been our bread and butter for years. Whereas, the other side of the house is kind of catching up to us. But on the other hand, they've had more budget, so they have access to way better tools in other areas. So it's a little bit of a trade-off. But I think the universality of making content into intelligent content is, the most important factor.
Mm-hmm. That's nice. Rahel. So how do you measure, or is there a way to measure the quality of the content?
Well, there are many ways to measure. And I think, first of all, you have to define quality. What does quality mean? So you could have quality that's of content that's very good editorial quality, but maybe your audience has literacy issues and it's not plain language enough, in which case that definition of quality would have to be changed to include low literacy. So first of all, you have to define quality. And for me, quality is, does it get the job done? Can people do what they need to do? Do they have a behavior change? And that behavior change is, I wanted to fix something. I wanted to complete a task. I was convinced to buy something. There are many ways to describe that. And then the quality is, did the content do that? And when I think about quality, I don't think only about copy, because I always say that there are two sides to content. There's an editorial side and a technical side. So if you don't take care of the technical side of your content, then it's not quality either, even if the copy is a very, very high quality. So again, with the tagging and the categorizing, you have to have high quality copy, but it also has to be chunked appropriately, and it has to have the right language, and it has to have the right tags on it, and it needs to have all of those measures. And then you have to perform analytics on it to say, did it actually do the job? And if it didn't, then you have to iterate it. So measuring the quality of the content starts from at the beginning how you write it, and then on a technical side how you mark it up, and then after the delivery of it and after people view it, did it actually do the job? So if you're looking at tools, there are many tools. There are the really kind of state-of-the-art artificial intelligence-driven tools like 𝐊𝐞𝐲 𝐓𝐚𝐤𝐞𝐚𝐰𝐚𝐲, right down to the kind of DIY tools like 𝐊𝐚𝐤𝐲, if you want to just measure how good is your copy, but that doesn't measure how good your content is. So I think that it's not about a tool per se, it's about the methodology.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. So as a content writer, what do you think one should have as the most important quality in order to succeed?
Wow, that's a big one. The most important quality, I think, is I'm going to call it that. But it's two parts. It's a natural curiosity. So, how does this work? How can I explain it better? That natural curiosity to always be asking the question of like, but why? But why? And this is where the 5 whys method comes in handy, because you're always asking, yes, but why? How does this work? And why does it work this way? But also, the flip side of that is to say, and how can I deliver this? But why? But why do we have to use Microsoft Word? But why do we have to put a PDF up on the site when we know that our users hate them? But why? So, it's kind of that natural curiosity, but on two sides of the content spectrum, both on the editorial and the technical side. Because if you don't have that, how could I do this better? How could I deliver it faster? How could I, automate the personalization? Then you're always going to fall behind your competition if you don't have that natural curiosity to be able to push back at the powers that be. And people who just kind of plod along and do it, that's good for the present, but they will soon find themselves kind of in an outdated model.
Understand. So the question, always keep questioning as to why certain things are happening, correct?
Yes.
Very nice, very nice. So that's why we say children are very curious. They want to know why certain things are happening, and you end up answering most of the time for their whys.
I found a flaw in an algorithm. And anyone who knows me knows that I'm very dyscalculic, and I really struggle with math on any level. I have to see something written down. But because I was trying to explain it, I found that I couldn't explain it. I couldn't explain the algorithm. And so I went to the guy who wrote it, and he and a couple of guys were standing there on a whiteboard, and I was saying, okay, the way I understand this works is like this. And it doesn't work, because when you get to this, I should be telling them to do something else, but it tells me this is going to happen. But according to my explanation, this other thing happens. And they had to kind of go, oh, actually, you're right. And so that only happened because I was really curious. It's like, why does this not make sense to me?
Yeah. True. So I'm going to move to our very exciting round, the rapid fire round.
Okay.
So who have you learned the most about content from in your career?
Wow. Can I have two answers?
Yes, please feel free. Yeah.
𝐊𝐿𝐞𝐲 and 𝐓𝐚𝐤𝐞𝐚𝐤𝐿.
All right, super. So do you want to add a little bit more to them?
Oh, sure, yes. So 𝐊𝐿𝐞𝐲 had kind of come up with certain concepts over the years of, single sourcing and intelligent content. And that's been so helpful in shaping how I view the world when it comes to content. And Scott Abel kind of let's say tag teams with Anne, because he's got that razor sharp ability to kind of cut through all the nonsense, and we'll get right down to it and say, actually, those three things that you mentioned aren't the problem at all. The problem is, when the boss decides that he's going to dig his heels in, then you're stuck. So that's the problem that you have to solve before you can solve these other problems. I would go, oh my gosh, he's so right. So, they really taught me to think about content in a holistic way and in a big picture way. And I'm ever grateful for them. I wouldn't have become the consultant that I am if it hadn't been for them.
Thank you, both of you. So can you share a content-related resource you have consumed recently?
So what do you mean by a content-related resource? Do you mean like a book that I've read or something like that?
Yeah, it could be a book, a blog, or some nice write-up from some community websites. Anything that you have consumed recently that you can share with our audiences today.
Actually, in the last little while, I have been reading about exponential transformation and exponential organizations. And one of the things that they had, and so it's about growth. So if companies want to grow, what do they need to do? And the fellow who kind of started this movement, his name is Salim Ismail. And I've known Salim for years and years and years, but he's gone on to do really exciting things in the last decade or so since I've really sat down to talk with him. And he wrote this book on like how the 11 things you need to grow. So he has a mnemonic that tells you 10 things. And when you ask, what's the 11th thing, he will say information enablement. If you are a company that cannot get your content out there, well, content and data, so your information, if you can't get it out there in a very agile way, in a very rapid way, you can't grow. You can never be an Airbnb, an Uber, a Spotify, all these companies who are disruptors, unless you can enable your information. How to do it? He doesn't say. He says it's very situational on your company, and I completely agree. But you have to be able to do it. And we see this problem this year where everyone had to respond to COVID all of a sudden. And you could either do it the hard way, like get a bunch of developers to work 20 hours a day for a month to get your content enabled. Or if you had paid attention to your content people from the beginning, then you could turn around and, pivot on a dime and enable all this new content. So that was the most fascinating resource I was reading. It was about content, but it wasn't about content, but it has everything to do with content.
Understand. Super. So this is a question that I always look forward to ask towards the end of this podcast. So I would like to hear from you, Rahel. What is the one piece of content-related advice you would give to your 20-year-old self?
Oh, that's such a good question. I would say to my 20-year-old self, there are jobs where you can work with words and you don't have to try to pigeonhole yourself into some other profession that you're not going to enjoy. If you enjoy working with words, there are jobs out there. You just have to go and find them.
Super. That's a good tip. So with all the podcast series I have done so far, one thing I can clearly see is there's so many variations to content writing, like UI, UX developers, technical architects, or technical documentation managers. So there is a number of professions with content writing and documentation. Do you agree with me?
Oh, yes. There are so many permutations and combinations. And I actually did a presentation a few years ago at 𝐊𝐞𝐲 where I talked about all the different things that people can be called and how they're slightly the same but slightly different. And And it continues on today, and I think it will. And the frustrating thing for me, and I think I'm going to write this into a Medium post at some point, is that when you look at these drop-down lists where they say, what is your primary profession? And they'll say, manufacturing, consulting, services, and they will have 10 kinds of art. But then content is nowhere. You go to the very bottom and it will say writing and editing, as if that's the only thing that you have. And content has become, in the last 20 years, it has become an industry unto itself. And so it's really frustrating when everyone just lumps everything into, oh, you're a writer. No, I'm not a writer. I don't write anything anymore. The only thing I write are strategies and reports. And sometimes I will write a sample piece of content to say, this is what I mean by chunking.
Yeah.
I don't actually write, I don't deliver because I'm a consultant, but I'm very much in content. So where do I fit on this matrix? And so I think a lot of us in content have that same situation where the job classifications have not kept up with the industry. And so everyone just thinks content is content. It's like this boring stuff that you sit in the corner and knit, you knit some content. And it's not. And so I think the next, my next windmill that I'll tilt at is getting people to put content on the roadmap.
Yeah, true, very true, Rahel. So thank you once again for your time today. And I think it's been an amazing journey you had, and especially sharing it with us, it makes us even more feel nice. So is there any last bits of tips and tricks you would like to share with our audience before we say bye to them?
I don't think so. I think we've covered quite a lot of ground in this half hour.
20 plus minutes, yeah, true.
For having me participate. And, I looked at your list of guests and it's very impressive. I'm going to go back and listen to some of the episodes.
Fantastic. Please do so and support us and the community and keep doing what you're doing. You're doing an amazing job. Enjoy your day and have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Knowledgebase Ninjas Podcast. Please head to iTunes, rate, and provide honest feedback on the podcast. See you next week.